So what do you do when you think you've got your farm succession plan in place? You think you know who your farming heir is going to be, but all of a sudden things go sideways. They say they're going to leave, they no longer want to be a part of the farm. Watch this video to learn more. Hi, I'm Jason Wagner, the farm lawyer. I work with family farmers every single day to help them pass the farm on to the next generation. At my law firm, Wagner Ehler, we've been doing it for over 50 years. What do you do when your farm successor says they no longer want to be a part of the farm? I've seen this happen a handful of times, generally, a few times a year in some cases, and for different reasons. It can be because the dynamic between the generations just doesn't allow them to work together. Maybe their mental health or their satisfaction with farming has just gotten to the breaking point, and one of them has to call it quits. I've seen it happen where they just don't agree on the future of the farm, or in a lot of cases where there's friction, even if they're not going to break up farming, is, the next generation might want to move quicker or do things different than the generation before, the way mom and dad have done it. And that can create a lot of tension. It can create a lot of risk on the farm. On the other hand, of course, farm technology is changing just as quickly as everything else out in the world. The way that the grain is marketed, the type of equipment, all of it. We've had situations where there might be equipment that, the older generation doesn't even know how to operate, and that younger farmer leaves. And so now we have to hire someone else to come in and actually maybe, harvest the crop. We've had situations where, maybe the spouse just farming is not for them. The hours are too demanding. The payoff is too little. I had a farmer in my office this week. He said, you wouldn't go work for a job in town, work all year long, and then not get paid for any of it, and show up the next day and keep doing it. You wouldn't take a check from somebody, have that check bounce, and then just allow them to keep paying by check. And that can be a little bit how farming feels right now. We've got, of course, high input costs, commodity prices, other than, certain sectors or like beef, are really not looking too good right now. The crop side is, it's going to be a big year for farm subsidies and payments. And that adds to the challenge, especially if we have a farm successor that maybe has been here when there was a lot more farm profit, there was a lot more cash on the farm. Now we're entering into a lean period. Farm bankruptcies are up, the stress is up. It's just a difficult time. So what do you do when you've put the plan in place for this farm successor, and then they decide it's time to leave? It starts how you start the transition plan. I always like to make sure that we've got commitment, not only from mom and dad's side, but also from the next generation. That means that we're not going to move a lot right away. We might not move anything right away. If they've come back to the farm, or they've worked off the farm and now they say, I want to do this for a living, let's let that happen. Let's prove it. Let's pay them just as an employee for a couple of years and see, is this what you want to do with your life? Can you work together well? Let's not force it at the front end. It's either going to work well or it's not. And we don't want to just push things along if it's not going to work well. I've seen a lot of father-son dynamics that do work really, really well together. And I've seen the complete opposite, where I think both of you are better off if you just stay away from each other, at least as it comes to farming, because I don't see it getting any better. So we don't like to start that transition right away. But when we are ready to start making that transition, I think of it like a toe in the water, okay? It's going to cost us some money and some time to set up a structure that we can do some transitions that we feel confident in. So let's say we're going to set up a farm LLC. We're going to move all of the equipment, inputs, livestock into this farm LLC. The land stays separate because we don't want to put that at risk. We're just focusing on the operating assets right now. We've got this farm LLC, then we'll give our farm successor, maybe 5% or 10% ownership. I generally like 10% because it's meaningful enough that we're starting to move some assets, but it's not so much that we're giving up control of the company and the farm. But we're not going to do this before we make sure that we have a good operating agreement and buy-sell in place. What do I mean by that? Well, you're going to gift you this 10%, but if you choose to leave the farm, or if you decide that this isn't for you and you want out, we're not going to buy you out at 10%. If we put $1 million of assets in here, you're not going to get a check for $100,000 of something I gave you that now you say you don't want. We're going to have what we call an early out business protection discount. We need to protect the business. That $100,000 value isn't just going to appear out of thin air. We're not going to rebuy equipment that we're already paying for or just finished paying for. So if you do want out, we're going to discount that, and we're going to discount it heavily. And that might be, staged over a number of years where that discount starts to peel back and lower, but it could be very high in the beginning. Maybe it's a 90% discount. So rather than a check for $100,000, you're going to get a check for $10,000. Again, where's that money going to come from? It's got to come from the farm. So we need to make sure it's protected. So that's one way we make sure that we, if our farm successor leaves, that we don't have ourselves exposed to too much. We transition a little bit gradually, but we don't even start the transition plan until we're confident that this is a career that they want, that they intend to be committed to it, that they're there for the long term. And once we do know that they're going to be there for the long term, we're going to transition little bits at a time, subject to a buy-sell agreement that keeps the control still with the first generation and puts discounts on it if that next generation decides this is no longer for them. And I should say, I know this is hard. It's family dynamics. I get that. You've got a lot of expectations riding on it. But farming is not for everyone. And that's not a fault of whoever is not going to be there to farm. I'm sure you've thought that to yourself before. Maybe I'd rather have a different job. There's a ton of benefits to farming and this lifestyle, and especially if it's a family farm that's been in your family multiple generations. But we can't ignore that this is not the lifestyle for everyone. Sometimes and sometimes it's not. So if they're saying, okay, I'm out, do we have to buy out anything back from them? If we do, hopefully we have a strong buy-sell agreement that dictates the price that we'll buy it back at, or at least a formula, and hopefully it discounts it enough that it's not going to break the farm. Then, of course, you're going to need to go ahead and update your farm estate planning documents. If you had your documents geared in such a way to make sure that everything farm-wise kind of ends up in the hands of that farm successor, clearly that's not what we want to have happen anymore. Maybe we want to keep the door open to that if they decide to come back later, and that's something that we can definitely build into your documents and the plan, but we need to update it and reflect the reality. You do not want to have a situation where they've left the farm and your documents are sitting there for 5 years or longer without having that reflected in. And then comes, is there another farm successor? Are there other kids in the family that have expressed an interest? We've seen that happen, where maybe somebody that thought that they wouldn't have a space on the farm. Now there's an opening, and they say, you know what, I've always wanted to do this. I am really committed to it. Again, some tough family dynamics there, but it is the next opportunity. We have to look around. It's just like in any other business, right? If I was selling a plumbing business and all of a sudden the person that was going to take it over is not there anymore, I'm going to look and see who else is out there. And sometimes it could be another farmer in the neighborhood. Maybe there's a younger farmer that farms the way you like to, and you see what they're doing, and you want to give them an opportunity to succeed at your farm or make your farm part of their farm. I've seen that both ways, where we have a direct sort of transition to a non-family farm successor, or other cases where we have more of a lateral move with that farm being kind of added to somebody else's operation, and both for different reasons. The economic reality, of course, is that whether it's a family farm successor or a non-family farm successor, we don't all of a sudden have the ability to just pay full fair market value. So even in non-family situations, very common to have discounts or preferable pricing terms for our farm successor. There's Maui. She's a good barn cat. If you'd like to learn more about farm succession planning, I've got a lot more content here on my channel. Check out farmlawyer.com and give us a call at 507-288-5567.